Excuse me. Excuse me. Can I ask you something? What do you do for a living?
I make and invest in Roblox games.
In Roblox games. What is Roblox?
So it's like an online game platform, so you can make your own game, that kind of thing.
He's gonna show us something, guys.
We are currently working on the biggest, most expensive Roblox game of all time.
Wow.
Do you guys know what Soul Level is?
Of course.
Yeah?
Yes.
This is our game.
Wow.
Most expensive, the best Roblox game ever made in the
world. So it opens up a GUI.
Our game, Arise.
First thing I did is, let me close this, right? So first thing I did is, if you go into new keybinds. So this is gonna be under this. It's gonna be under the set name, or the arsenal name, common, and the set is gonna be client, right? The reason why it's common, or it's called common, is because because of the way you set this up with arsenals, and like you have categories and then you have subcategories like that, right? The way you set it up, you cannot have just something called client right here, right? You cannot just call this client right here with nothing under it. You need some kind of thing under it. So the holder of the client thing, or the client submodule, is going to be called common. You could call it whatever. It has one keybind in it. Okay, that's all it has. Secondly, right, like over here, and delete everything else, we have one new function, and the find match function is also changed, and I believe the deliver function is changed a little bit. So first thing, we're gonna go to get boundary type. So the get boundary type is used to get the different type of like boundary that you're on. So for example, a input could be a server. It could be, I called it boundary, but you can really call it whatever. I didn't want to call it input type because I already have one up here that it's not related, so I just want to call it something different, right? So boundary worked, but this says get boundary type, right? And that basically means it's either a server input or a client input, right? Because you're gonna have inputs that are like client based, UI based, whatever, dashing, literally whatever. That could be client based, but then you could also have inputs that are like in-ones or autos that are server based, right? So it uses this core functions module. So I made two new modules. So we made the client module. This is just for, this is the exact same thing as like a server module, where like the actual code belongs for the thing. Now if we look at it, I put it in here. I'll tell you what it's about in a second. But if you look in here, all it does is just one line of code that just toggles on and off a GUI that's already already has a variable for it. But that's all this module is. Doesn't really matter. The most important one is core functions. So core functions is basically just functions in your game that are I guess like the core, vital, right? Functions that you use a lot, right? And so this one, at least for my game, I use it a lot, right? So this is called gate. I also made another function real quick. I'll show you real quick. So we have the actual client input. We have the keybinds module. I made a new keybind for the client input. We made the actual code for the client input, like that toggles on and off the GUI. And so the setup module right now, right, is used to basically set up to add certain settings to different arsenals and different different sets. So for example, if you wanted to, you could just make it so that every single time they press an input, if it checks their set name, and the set name, for example, is Freshie, like if it's Freshie, for example, it's a server input, right? If it's client, if the set name is client, it's automatically a client input. But the problem with that, it would be just saying, like this function right here would just be if set name is equal to client, then you will return client, and if it's not, right, if it's else, then you're gonna return server. But the problem with that is that when you're like coding, you don't want to like hard code things, because this means that only this client module, only the single client right here, only the set name client, any set with a name of client, those are the only client inputs. There's nothing else that has client inputs. Maybe you want some kind of other category later on, so it's good to not hard code things, and it's also good to let your little techniques, different arsenals or different sets have different settings. For example, you might want a setting that like allows like a default module to be used. Like if there's not a keybind, maybe use a default input. I don't really know how to explain it, but you don't really want to hard code things, and how you get around that is basically you make the setup module, right? So the setup module basically just talks about if I can put it back. Okay, so setup module basically just says that you can have different settings. For example, later on I could probably put for the whole arsenal of common, every set in there is a client set. It's like client based. They have client based inputs. I could do that later on with this setup thing, and it's very nice because you can just easily change different settings of sets or arsenals and add different things. For example, different weights or different weapons in my game have different weights. For example, let me go to my setup module. So I have a lot of shit in mine, but if you look at mine, I have these. So also the most important thing is that client is telling you it's a client-based thing, right? Has different weights for different weapons. There's a lot of different settings. There's like a ton of them, right? And that's kind of why you want some kind of similar thing in yours. Yeah. It's not switching back for some reason. It's interesting. Okay, okay, there we go. So that's the reason why we're doing this, but yeah, you can add, don't really like think about why, but basically under this setting, under this set, we're adding a custom setting called client to not hard code things, because maybe later on I want like a weapon for some reason. I don't know why you would do this, but like maybe dagger also has client-based inputs, and so you want to make this set also have client-based inputs, right? So that's the reason why we're doing that. And then we actually get into using that setting, or like to actually putting in the functionality of that setting being used. And the way it's used is this core functions module, right? So this core functions module basically takes in 3 parameters. It can take in an arsenal name, and then it optionally takes in a set name, okay? And then also takes in a setting, like the setting that you want to fetch. So number 1, it gets the arsenal settings, so that would be this common thing. It gets this table right here, right? And then it also tries to get the set settings. So that's like everything in here, right? All the sets, like everything, all this table, right? This whole table right here tries to get that as well. The only thing is I made it kind of optional because, again, it's bad to hard code things, because what if you wanted to make it so that you don't always have to have set settings? Like, what if you just never wanted to have a set setting? Like, okay, so maybe I didn't want this set to exist, or maybe, so maybe we had multiple different client sets or something like that, or different sets that shared the same setting, and you didn't want them to have to type them all out and then put client equals true in the setting, client equals true for each one. You can instead just delete every single set setting, and you can just add it to the whole arsenal. So that makes it optional, right? So that makes it optional to even add a set or send in a set name to the function. So it optionally takes in 1. That's why this question mark is here for type checking. It basically just means it can be a string or it could be nil. So it could be a string or it can be a nil. That's what the question mark means. So it checks if there's set settings, and if there's not, it just returns. It tries to index the arsenal setting for that setting. And I'll go into like the logic in a second, but let me go deeper down first. So if it finds the set settings, it's gonna try to index the set settings for the setting that you're trying to find, right? So in here you have, so here, right, saying this is basically what happens whenever we find a keybind. Basically what we're doing is we're sending in the arsenal and the set name. So this happens for every single keybind. So every single keybind every single set in arsenal is having this code ran on it, where basically it's checking if there is a client equals true setting inside of their set, okay? Inside of their set settings. If there is, it's going to return it. If there's not, what happens is that it can't go through this if statement here, right? So it returns, so this if statement completely finishes because there's no more code inside of here, right? This is if it doesn't find a set setting that you're trying to find. So if it can't find one, this if statement completely finishes, right? And then it just hits an early return right here, where it returns, it tries to index the arsenal setting as like a last resort. So basically the set setting, to describe this, the set setting is prioritize, but if it can't find it, or if there's no set settings, then it's going to return whatever setting you're trying to find in the arsenal. So what we're doing here is we're setting these two parameters, set and arsenal name, and then we're checking for the client setting. So this is where we actually add the functionality. So we check if the search result was equal to true. So this is the search result, and checking if the arsenal or set name has a setting equal to true, like the client setting equal to true. If it does, it's going to return that this is a client input. If it doesn't, it's going to return that this is a server input. And so once it has that, right, you're going to add it to the list of things, the list of like tables, or like list of information that you're sending into like to the server, not to the server, but like just have it in this list of information here, right? Because when this find match function gets done, right, that whole table right here, right, is stored inside of match, right here. And so when we actually deliver the input, when we're trying to send off the input to the server, we then just unpack the table, because we want to check the last part of it. We want to check the last part of it. Honestly, everything else you could literally just do this, because you're not going to use them. But the most important thing, oh actually no, you will use the action name, but you're just most important. The most important things are the action name and the boundary type. So these would be like, if the boundary type is equal to client, because we already described that up here, right? If the boundary type is equal to client, it's gonna go into this client module. So that's the client module we saw earlier, right here. It's literally just going to index by the action name. So the client module is right here. It's going to index by the keybind name that you had, the action name, and that would be open inventory. The reason why I didn't set it up like this is because this has a space, and remember with the dot index, the dot operator thing, you can't do that. You can do the other way around. You can do this, But I guess also for some reason, like, it doesn't like, oh wait, hold on, I think it's supposed to be like this. It doesn't like when you format it like this. So another way to do this is just setting the I mean, that's what you do when you make functions. You set the index to you set the index to a function, right? That's just another way to format, because I guess it doesn't like the other way for some reason. But yeah, that's a client module, that's a setup module, that is the core functions module. In my game I have a lot of core functions, like there's a lot for utility and other things like that, so it's very good. And that's how that works. The reason why we have this in effects is because we have this client module in effects is because it's kind of weird to have these folders right here, right? And imagine you just made the arsenal folder holding the modules, the client modules right here, or anything for that matter, because you're not just gonna have one client module. Again, I told you, like, don't hard code things. So for example, if I were to say this was, if I were to call this game or something like that, and then I had another folder inside of that, right? And I called this folder common, and then I called this I called this client. See, now you can have multiple folders in here, but it's kind of weird because eventually you're gonna add like effects for specific weapons, specific client like things right here, right? So it's gonna be kind of weird if you have this whole lone folder to itself for just client inputs. So I put it in an effects folder. You just treat basically the client's modules as effects, basically, and that's all you do. I'll get into effects like probably the next time, but one last thing is give me a second. So the one last thing is probably different like settings. So different settings are different checks, but on the client, like locally, right? So for example, imagine you wanted the game to check if they're trying to shift lock when they're doing an M1 or something like that, right? And you didn't want them to be able to like do that. The easiest way to basically wait, let's see, hold on, give me a second. Okay, yeah, so the easiest way to go about this is there is yeah, I was just checking my game, but there's we can make a new, I think we can probably, so the thing here is you can either make another function or you can keep adding to the list of like different if statements in here, and it would be kind of messy, but you can add a little function. Actually, I'll just do it right now. So actually it depends, because you gotta think about it, because if you remove all of this code and you put it into its own function, so for example, if I just had a function and I just named it gets settings, the problem with that is that these are not going to have the required variables that they want, because remember, this is out of scope. It doesn't have the arsenal name. The arsenal name was gotten from this loop right here, right? Of course we're going to call it here. We're going to call this get settings function here, but you know, like this arsenal, nice. So this arsenal name, the set name, the action name, whatever, is you get it basically whenever you're looping around, and it's not in the scope. So you can either add to the list of things, or you can make another function and redo all your variables as parameters that are sent in. You know what I mean? So, for example, some things that you can do though is if you wanted to do, if for example you wanted to do shift lock based inputs and checking and checks if they're shift locking, you use user input service.mouse behavior. There's probably other ways to do it, but that's the easiest one. So you could enum. So to work in tangent with this, you use the enum mouse behavior, and you have different ones. I think the useful one for shift locking is this, and then you also want to check if, okay, so you don't want this to happen for every single input, because what if, for example, they're doing something, okay, they're opening up a GUI, they're opening up their inventory, and they have to be shift locked to open up their inventory. Maybe you don't want that, but maybe you want some inputs, some client, some in1s or something like that to force you to shift lock if you want to do something. So it changes based on whatever. So you want it to be in the action data. So that would be actually in the action data. So you could say if action data.shift lock, and they're not lock center, basically means you're shift locked, by the way. Enum.mouse behavior.lock center basically means you're shift locked. So if the action data says they're shift lock, it's supposed to be a shift locked move, and they aren't shift locked, you just want to continue, right? You want to continue. Also, you can put this over here, you can put this on one line, but it gets kind of messy. I mean, that's why you can move this all out to one function, because now your indents are like 4 indents long, and so your code becomes, it goes to the side very easily. If you have a big monitor, it might be better, but that's for example how that would work. Just different settings, you would define it in there in this input module. For server settings, you would do that in a different way, but let me show you how this would work. So if I say shift lock is equal to true, so the minute I press T, it doesn't work immediately once I press shift lock, right? So shift locked, I'm not shift locked, I press T, it doesn't work. When I press shift lock and IT, it works now. So you can do this in different ways. You can do this with shift lock. Just to check my game real quick, I do things, for example, there's different modifiers. For example, you can press down different keys to change the activation of how your keys work. So for example, like what's it called, like Super Smash Bros, where like you have modifiers for different moves and stuff. Yeah, that's like how that would work. But that's how you implement settings, that's how you implement client inputs. I'll talk about like client checks, client safety checks, just to make sure they're not like doing anything bad, I guess, you know. But yeah.